All right. Andy, we're live. Take it away.
Welcome to OZ NewsHour. I'm Andy Hagans here with Jimmy Atkinson. Today is Monday, October 28th, 2024, and we are covering the most important stories in the world of opportunity zones.
We're talking about opportunity zones. We're talking about opportunity zones.
I knew it would be a Dodgers hat, Jimmy. I knew it.
Yeah, well, it has to be the Dodgers hat because sorry about your Tigers, Andy. I know they lost a couple weeks ago, but I'm from LA, so I'm pulling for the Dodgers in the World Series here. And it's been a pretty compelling World Series. Great first two games. We got game 3 tonight, but let's turn our attention to opportunity zones. Now we're going to talk a lot about opportunity zones during the course of today's episode, but first, let's get this thing on the screen, Andy. Where'd it go? There it is. Sorry, technical difficulties over here, folks. Are you looking to take your OZ strategy to the next level, but maybe you're not sure where to go? OZ Insiders offers comprehensive premium content and networking to help you get started. Our monthly masterclass meetings cover a wide range of topics from fundamentals to advanced, ensuring you have what you need to thrive. And as a member of OZ Insiders, you'll get access to our exclusive online community and monthly group masterclass calls, providing you with valuable OZ networking opportunities and guidance from the very best OZ professionals in the industry. So whether you're a beginner and you're looking to get to the next level, we have what you need. Visit ozinsiders.com to learn more. That's ozinsiders.com. Andy, back to you.
Yeah, we have some great events planned at OZ Insiders coming up in the next 60 days. So we're going to get to that later on in the show. Today is our special election episode here at OZ NewsHour. And I know our audience, it's like you haven't been hearing enough about the election. It's not like we're seeing commercials about it 24/7, getting text messages, getting bombarded with all this election coverage. No, this, though, in all seriousness, this is a special election episode dedicated especially to how this upcoming presidential election, congressional election is going to affect the Opportunity Zones program, because as we're going to find out, as we're going to discuss, it could legitimately be a game changer. So we're going to get to a bunch of election coverage in just a minute, but we have a few other stories to cover. Some pretty cool stuff going on in the world of Opportunity Zones. And our first story, Jimmy, is about your friends over at Caliber. And, you know, the OZ program, it's now, 5 years old, really, in its implementation, give or take. Every once in a while, there still is something brand new. And this is something that is very unique that Caliber is doing.
Absolutely, Andy. It's the most consequential election of my lifetime, I keep being told. So yeah, we're going to talk about that a lot more later in the episode, but let's get some hard OZ news coverage in first. Chris Loeffler first started conceptualizing this OZ roll-up, they're calling it, or I think they're calling it a QOF roll-up, excuse me. I first heard about it from him a couple years back when he was just first thinking up the idea, and took them a little while to get their legal team on it and draft up everything that they needed to. But congrats to Chris and his team, because end of September, beginning of October is when they officially completed their first OZ merger. Resulted in a $14 million increase in their QOF Fund 1. What they did was they had an investor who had already contributed $14 million into his own self-directed or captive qualified opportunity fund. A couple years passed, and he wasn't able to find the deal that he wanted. I'm not sure if a couple years have passed now. I'm not sure what the timeline was exactly, but suffice it to say that this investor wasn't going to be able to manage the fund like he thought he might have been able to, or he wasn't able to find the deal that he wanted to participate in. And a fund cannot invest directly in another fund, but he really liked the team at Caliber and their strategy. And so Chris invited him to be the very first fund to get merged into another one. So this is a product where Caliber, an institutional level fund with $200+ million across their two total OZ funds, can find investors who have funded their own captive QOFs, usually in the range of $1 million to $25 million, somewhere in that range is when it makes sense. And they can essentially just merge them into their fund through a pretty advanced legal structure that they've put together. And it ticks all the compliance boxes. And so congrats to Chris and this investor who I don't believe was named in this press release out of his privacy. But a great program here. And Andy, we did also have Chris on the show last week to discuss this merger program. What do you think of this OZ fund roll-up program? And what do you think of the episode that I did with Chris?
Well, I always like to hear from Chris, and I mean, kudos to him because this is a really unique idea. And I have to say, in all of my interaction with, different alternative investment sponsors and fund managers and different thought leaders, like in the family office world and so on and so forth, I mean, I have heard a lot of ideas, right, involving like, oh, we could set up this structure or do this kind of thing, this tax advantage thing, this, that, or the other strategy. And to be honest, I think 90 to 95, maybe 98% of them never really go anywhere, never come to fruition. So it's awesome, Jimmy, that, this began as an idea. And then, of course, you have to get lawyers involved to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. But it's awesome to see this come into fruition. And I know that there are a lot of self-directed QOFs, opportunity zone funds out there that are still sitting on cash that needs deployed. And so the idea that, this vehicle exists, it's awesome. And obviously Caliber's institutional level, they're a publicly traded company, right? So it's great to see the diversity in the opportunity zones world and the maturation of the industry a little bit and just more options, because it's a great tax incentive, but you don't want to let the tail wag the dog and get locked into a deal you don't want to do just to get a tax incentive. So this is like just another great option for investors.
Yeah, a lot of investors, they trigger capital gain. They're advised, just throw it in your own QOF and we'll figure out what to do with it later. Well, this is another option for those investors. If they don't want to end up running their own deals, they can merge into an institutional fund such as Caliber's, Andy.
And let us know in the chat what you think of this idea. We have, let's see, couple dozen people watching along in the live chat. So we do want this to be interactive. Jimmy, I know you've been doing more live streaming lately. Both we do OZ NewsHour. You've also been doing your office hours Q&A, and we're getting more and more interaction on our YouTube channels, which is great. So please keep it coming.
If you have any questions or comments, or if you like the Dodgers or the Yankees, you want to talk baseball or opportunity zones, feel free to throw it in the comments on YouTube or LinkedIn, wherever you're watching.
If you're a Yankees fan, just get off the stream. I have to just get. I kid. Jimmy, anything more on Caliber?
I think that's all, Andy.
Let's take it to the next story because we got a lot to cover today, and this is from your friends over at Pinnacle Partners.
That's right, Andy. So Pinnacle Partners, congrats to them. They just closed their OZ Fund 8, a $90 million raise, which is going to be invested across 4 different residential development projects. And the article here notes that 2 of them are market rate communities within NFL stadium districts, one close to the Denver Broncos stadium and the other one close to the Tennessee Titans stadium in Nashville, Tennessee. They also have a build to rent single family home in Avondale, Arizona, and another build to rent townhome in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I want to add that they have pretty much the same time they closed this fund, they opened their next OZ fund, which will be their first opportunity zone fund that is dedicated solely to the build to rent asset class. They have 3 different identified projects in Georgia and Alabama. If I can remember correctly, let's see, it's Huntsville, Alabama, Augusta, Georgia, and Decatur, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta, where those 3 build to rent opportunity zone deals are located. And I was pleased to be able to host a sponsored webinar sponsored by Pinnacle Partners and their partner, Trilogy Investment Company. Just last week, we had a couple hundred people register for this webinar, and I think it was quite a few people in attendance. Nearly 100 people attended live, and a lot more have viewed the webinar after the fact. So this is available on our YouTube channel. If you search for opportunityzones.com YouTube channel, you'll find it there. The Build to Rent OZ Investing Strategy Investor Webinar with Jeff Feinstein's partner, my friend Jeff Feinstein's partner, Leo Backer, Jill Homan, a favorite of ours here, and Mike Nolan from Trilogy Investment Company were on the webinar. Great roundtable discussion on the merits of BTR investing, and also especially within opportunity zones, and then a little look under the hood at their 3 deals. Andy, I know you caught at least, I think you caught most of the webinar. What did you think?
Pinnacle is always their webinars. I don't want to insult anybody else, but they're kind of a cut above, just like the sophistication of their sophistication of the GPs that they have running their deals. I always just try and soak in as much as I can. Like obviously Jill comes to pitch day, and another thing about her, she's a straight shooter. I would say she tells it like it is. She doesn't dress anything up. And I wanted to ask you, Jimmy, about build to rent, because it's as a niche, as a sort of a subsector, when it started to get hot, right, along with basically everything else. It seemed like it was crazy hot in 2020 and 2021, and then a lot of other sectors cooled down. But it seems like build to rent is one of those sectors that has sort of stayed hot. It's like catnip. I know, with our email list, when we send out an email about anything build to rent, the open rate is really, really high. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there's so much interest in build to rent, even in an otherwise, kind of slow commercial real estate market?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's different, right? It's just a differentiated product type. The vast majority of opportunity zone deals that we see on OZ Pitch Day or that are funded typically are just straight multifamily deals. And there's a reason for that, right? Like it's very plain vanilla investment, just a multifamily building, whether it's Class A, Class B, Class C, depending on, it could be in any market, right? But build to rent, I don't know, it's a little bit more intriguing because it's a little bit different in some ways. And I think, the whole thesis behind build to rent is that home ownership is becoming less and less affordable, and especially with the interest rate hikes that we had seen up until just a month or two ago. Affording a home was very difficult for a lot of young families who wanted a little bit more than an apartment. It's nice to live in an apartment when you're young potentially, but you have a family, you have a kid or two, you get a dog, you want to enjoy the benefits of home ownership, but maybe you can't afford to actually buy the home. Well, that's where these build to rent communities come in. Some of them are townhomes, but a lot of them are just master plan single family home communities that are built specifically not to sell to potential home buyers, but to rent to renters long-term fashion. The idea is these aren't renters who are going to turn over every 12 or 24 months, but they might be there renting for years and years and years, Andy. So I think those are a couple of the reasons why I think that our emails about this product type get such high open rates, and why this particular webinar that I did with Pinnacle Partners and Trilogy last week had such high attendance. But what are your thoughts? What do you think of BTR? Why are you intrigued by it?
Well, I think you're right that it is something different, and maybe that's that's always a really good thing from a marketing perspective or strategic perspective, is just to be different, but it's almost like if you squint, you can kind of be like, well, it's not so different from multifamily, right? It's the same thesis that everyone needs a roof over their head. But then when you dig into multifamily, there's all these subsectors, right? And you also have student housing and senior housing. And so it's like the multifamily market, it's not really one market. It's a collection of a lot of different demographics and markets. And I think you're absolutely right that when you look at the demographic, who's going to be renting in a build to rent single family home or larger townhome in one of these communities, it is going to be a different demographic. So it is a slightly different strategy. But anyway, the fact that Jill Homan is investing in it, is involved in this deal, makes me just already like, it kind of makes me take a second look and be like, I need to look into build to rent more. Because there's obviously, outside of a lot of interest from our list, there's also some very, very, very smart sponsors who are investing in it. Absolutely,
Andy. Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, Andy, I think you're right to point out that at the end of the day, this is just roofs, I think roofs over people's heads, kind of all attacking from a lot of different angles that housing shortage that we're experiencing in this country, depending on who you ask, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million unit shortfall that opportunity zones are putting a dent in, among a lot of other programs as well.
Yep. Speaking of a dent, Jimmy, our events are going to put a dent in your fall schedule, right? We have several OZ Insiders events queued up. But before we go into what's queued up, I did want to do a little recap, at least, of the previous masterclass that we did with Chris Loeffler. So he's been in the OZ news a lot lately, where he presented on distressed OZ real estate strategies in our private mastermind group. Jimmy, I thought that was another banger. Like,
this one was really, really good. And we recorded this one with Chris a couple weeks or maybe a week before he came on the podcast to talk about his QOF roll-up strategy. So the QOF roll-up had already happened. The press release had come out, but that's not why Chris was at our masterclass back in earlier this month, a couple weeks back on October 14th, although we did touch upon it briefly. But this was all about the strategy that Caliber has been executing on for the past couple of years. They completely changed their strategy, and they're really trying to acquire distressed properties in opportunity zones and transform them into viable assets. He walked us through a case study of an adaptive reuse office building conversion. They're converting to parking structure and multifamily building. Again, more roofs or roofs over people's heads. I'm pretty sure it's roofs. Then it was a true masterclass from a master of opportunity zones, Chris Loeffler. Andy, I know you saw, I think you were there for most of the meeting, if not all of it. What were your thoughts on distressed OZ real estate investing?
Well, I thought it was the perfect timing. I mean, for me personally, as an investor looking at deals, and then also just talking to other sponsors or investors, operators around the market, it certainly feels, Jimmy, if I can talk about vibes, maybe they're not measurable. I mean, there's some data probably to support this. But between the interest rate cuts that are kind of a leading indicator, and then some of the, asset pricing, which can be a little bit more of a lagging indicator, it's starting to feel like this might be a really good moment to jump in the market, or maybe wade into the market, or tiptoe into the market and go shopping for assets, because depending on the market, the sector, the geographic market, it might not be that efficient of a market, depending on what kind of assets are in your wheelhouse as a sponsor or as an investor. And so I think looking at distressed right now, where you could have some real value add, where you could get a little bit better financing than you could have gotten a year ago. Like, it still is not, as good as the old heydays of 2021. But so I think this is a really timely topic, and I'm beginning to sense more optimism and willingness to say, you know what, let's take a second look at some of these assets. Let's maybe put some of our dry powder to work. And so I think distressed is a great strategy right now, because you also have some of these other operators who were, kind of irresponsible in terms of the prices they paid for assets and the deals they did with now interest rates, and their loans are coming due and rolling over at much higher interest rates. So I think that it's just a great topic for this moment in time. Yeah.
A lot of these projects are hitting up against a maturity wall, and they're going to have to refinance at rates much higher than they might have been underwritten at several years back under a previous ZIRP, zero interest rate policy. So it'll be interesting to see how that wall of maturities all plays out over the next, I'd say 12 to 24 months here, but there might be a lot of distressed deals available. Keep up for pennies on the dollar.
Jimmy, with that debt rolling over, hitting that wall, I think it's just interesting that interest rates are down a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it's like they're not necessarily, they haven't dropped enough to rescue some of these deals that are in trouble.
Right.
But at the same time, it's, they don't make it quite as attractive to buy assets as like an ultra low interest rate, but there might be just enough breathing room, right, where someone can come in and get some positive leverage. So I think even the smaller rate cuts that we've had so far is helpful. And by the way, I think we have a question in the chat going back to Chris Loeffler's and Caliber's announcement about the roll up.
Yeah, let's see. Heather asks, hi, Heather. Thanks for coming. She asks, how do we find self-directed QOZ funds? Ooh, that is a good one. So there's not any repository or database of self-directed qualified opportunity funds. What I have available on my website at opportunityzones.com and what Novogradac has available on their website at novaco.com and their OZ Resource Center, we have lists of OZ funds that are like actively going out to the marketplace to raise capital. But if you're a private investor and you sold your business for $25 million and you're putting some or all of that into your own qualified opportunity fund, you might not necessarily announce that to the world. You don't have to announce it to anybody. In fact, you don't have to fill out any paperwork with the SEC. All you do is file with the IRS every year, an extra couple of forms on your tax return annually, but those don't get published, right? Or if they do, they get published in terms of aggregated data that doesn't disclose any personal information. So I would say a couple ways where you can kind of get at self-directed funds. One is inside our OZ Insiders mastermind group. We do have a number of individuals who are attorneys and CPAs who they themselves may have self-directed OZ funds, but more to the point, they have clients that have self-directed OZ funds. And so if you kind of bounce some ideas off of our group coaching sessions, the next one of which will take place. When is that one? Next one, Andy? It's in 2 weeks from today. It's always the second Monday of every month. That's a good place to find them. I would say also email me. I might be able to put you in touch with some QOZ funds that are self-directed. Andy, what other ideas do you have for Heather here?
Well, I was going to say, I think the largest gathering of folks that have their own self-directed QOZ fund would be OZ Pitch Day, because I know because it's just it's the largest virtual gathering of OZ investors in the world, as far as I know. We do it 3 times a year. And even though there are a lot of investors who are looking to be limited partners in other funds, I will still say there are always people in the audience that have self-directed funds that, I don't know what percentage, but
absolutely,
it's a pretty common thing. So I think OZ Pitch Day is definitely another place where those kind of people hang out, so to speak.
No, yeah, Andy, it was interesting. We just ran our 2024 opportunityzones.com annual OZ survey. And, one of the questions I ask, we haven't published the data on it yet. I've just closed the survey and I'm just starting to compile the data into a big comprehensive report that we're going to be releasing later this fall. But one question I ask is, how are your OZ investments structured? And the biggest answer was through my own self-directed qualified opportunity fund. So the folks who responded to my survey, at least the more engaged folks on my email list, they more often than not have their own self-directed QOF. So I would say, Heather, come to OZ Pitch Day, come to OZ Insiders, send me an email if you have any other thoughts or questions about that. Great question, by the way.
And Jimmy, what else do we have coming online here in the next 60 days?
November is a very busy month, Andy. I mean, not only do we have an election, the most consequential election of my lifetime, as I hinted at earlier, right? As I keep being told, but we also have not one, not two, but 3 big Opportunity Zone events. And if you know of any others, let us know in the chat or in the comments. Also, who out there is coming to the Novogradac 2024 Fall OZ Summit? If you're coming, let me know. Submit something in the comment section here on YouTube or LinkedIn. Let me know why you're coming. Love to read your response on the air here. But first up is the Novogradac conference. They do one of these a year. Last year's was also in Washington, D.C. This one is in Washington, D.C. I'm on the agenda page here. The date of this is Wednesday, November 6th. And I'll just kind of scroll through the agenda, give you a little peek under the hood of what's happening at this Novogradac OZ Summit. Pleased that OpportunityZones.com is a media partner with Novogradac for, I believe, the 4th or 5th year in a row. We've been partnered on these events for quite some time here. This first one, I mean, with all due respect to all of the other panels that come on throughout the course of the day, this first one, the Washington Report, is by far and away my favorite one, because I get to hear from Michael Novogradac, and he has 3 really big time speakers up on the stage with him who have their ear to the ground on Capitol Hill. Grace Enda is a policy analyst for the U.S. Senate Committee on Finance. Manar Hanna is in Senator Tim Scott's office. And then Catherine Lyons is a longtime director of policy at the Economic Innovation Group. All three of these folks really know how the sausage gets made on Capitol Hill. And they're going to give us a look into what we can expect in terms of upcoming guidance from Treasury, and also what may happen with legislation regarding opportunity zones. So this one's the one I'm looking forward to the most. I should note, by the way, that Wednesday, November 6th is one day after Election Day. So we might know who won the election by then. If we do, I think this will be even much more powerful. And then I'll just kind of skim through the rest of these. Andy, I don't know if you want to chime in and let me know if you're looking forward to any of these or hearing about what happens in any of these. I am on this next panel after lunch. We just did our pre-panel call earlier this morning with my fellow panelists. On this one, we're going to be talking about what could an OZ 1.5 look like, and what could an OZ 2.0 look like. Also, if opportunity zones get extended by a couple years, but then also maybe a brand new reauthorization, a new OZ program that would give the program another 8 to 10 years. And then the other couple of panels are getting into more technical matters with a sponsor here at Red Brick, and then some CPAs and some attorneys on this behind the curtain panel before. I mean, this is why everybody really comes, is the 5 p.m. networking reception cocktail hour with Michael Novogradac and company. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. Andy, what are your thoughts here? I know you're not able to make it out to Washington, D.C. with me this year. I hope to get you out there for the next one, but anything in particular that catches your eye about this agenda?
Well, in general, you mentioned the networking reception is always very popular. I just find that when you get a bunch of accountants together and tax lawyers, and they throw a party, it's just too much for me. It just gets a little bit out of control, and I'm just more of a low key guy. They party pretty hard over there.
They can party hard. They can party hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Andy. Now I should also mention that this is the big event, right? This is like the big in-person event that happens for the opportunity zones industry every year. I'm kind of riding on their coattails here. The night before this Novogradac OZ Summit, so theirs takes place on Wednesday, November 6th. The night before, I am hosting our OZ Insiders private dinner right around the corner from the Fairmont Hotel, which is where the Novogradac OZ Summit takes place. I'm hosting a dinner at Riss Restaurant in Washington, D.C. It's open to OZ Insiders members. So if you're interested in attending this dinner, join OZ Insiders or shoot me an email. Let me know that you're interested in coming. We can work out a way for you to get there and join our OZ Insiders mastermind group. This is Monday, November 5th at 7 p.m. right around the corner. Yeah, here's the map here. Fairmont Hotel, Washington, D.C., Georgetown neighborhood, just right around the corner, 5-minute walk to the restaurant here. So we have I believe it's the Federal Room at Riss reserved. It's going to be a great time there. Let's see. Here's a look at the room. Here's the table that'll be in there. We've got a hard cap at 20 people. I think I've got 17 people RSVP yes so far. So we got space for a few more. I'm going to try to get that filled up in the next few days here, Andy. I think it's going to be a great collection of my OZ Insiders Mastermind members and maybe a few other select guests as well. Andy, we got to get you out for the next one here. I know you can't make this one. You did make our dinner in Chicago over the spring, though. But what's your general sentiment regarding getting together in person, these dinners for the OZ Insiders?
Well, it was a blast in Chicago. And yeah, great steak, great conversation, great times were had by all. Yeah, Jimmy, I am sorry to miss this one, but I do want to mention that, well, first of all, if you're interested in coming to this private dinner, you can literally go to ozinsiders.com right now, sign up for the group, and you'll be invited, right? So it's invite only for the private mastermind members. Secondly, if you're not able to make the Novogradac conference in general or this private dinner, I wanted to plug our upcoming masterclass on Tuesday, November 12th, because we're, really what you're going to get at Novogradac, I think, Jimmy, is a little bit of the inside baseball, inside information from the election fallout. and we're going to be covering that same topic in the masterclass on Tuesday, November 12th with Emily Lavery. So I did want to plug that as well, because that's a virtual masterclass. So I'm looking forward to that one too.
Yeah, awesome, man. Yeah, good to point that out. And yeah, starting next month, we have been doing these masterclasses every month for the past year now. This will be the first one coming up. By the way, it's on Tuesday, November 12th, because I know a lot of people have Veterans Day off on Monday, November 11th. So we kicked it an extra 24 hours. Also gives the state voting boards, or whatever they're called around the country, just one extra day to get their act together. And hopefully we have the election results by then. We'll know who won the presidency, the House, and the Senate. So we'll have a lot more to discuss on this masterclass. But starting next month, we're also offering 30 minutes of OZ group coaching at the beginning. So at 2:30 p.m. is when the Zoom call begins. The first 30 minutes is just group coaching. If you have any questions about opportunity zones, I'll be there to help basically one-on-one the solutions with you. And then at 3 o'clock is when Emily Lavery gets up on stage and gives a masterclass on what she expects to transpire in the Super Bowl of tax, that is the 2025 congressional session. So really looking forward to that one. Andy, thanks for the plug there. Should I get to our third big event of the month? I guess this is the fourth big event, but we've got the OZ Insiders Dinner, the Novogradac OZ Summit. We've got this OZ Insiders Masterclass coming up, but the big 800-pound gorilla in the room, Andy, you know what it is?
I sure do.
It's OZ Pitch Day. So opportunityzones.com, we are hosting OZ Pitch Day once again. It's going to be our 13th OZ Pitch Day event.
But the first one where we have the premium domain name, right?
The first one with the premium domain name that we acquired a month ago, opportunityzones.com. So really looking forward to this event. Here's a little graphic with just a handful of the speakers that'll be in attendance this morning. This press release just went out this morning, Andy.
And Jimmy, sorry to speak over you, but I got to tell people, if you bring up the agenda, I've never seen an agenda fill up this early. I mean, even, with some of the really popular pitch days, like in 2022, there's just been a ton of interest in this one, both from funds, including some new offerings, and lining up panelists. Jimmy, I think it's really maybe the election, but there's just sort of this renewed sort of undercurrent of optimism that I'm feeling from everyone, from both the sponsors and from investors and other market participants. And this agenda is filling up very quickly. Like, it's already pretty full. I'm sure you'll squeeze in a few more sponsors between now and the actual pitch day, but great job teeing up this event, Jimmy, because I think this is going to be maybe the best one yet. Although, of course, I always say that for every pitch day.
It's definitely the best one coming up next. No, I really am looking forward to this one. I think you're right, Andy. You hit on something. I don't know. I don't really keep track of exactly when I fill up the agenda, but it does feel like, or there's just a vibe that's a little bit different about this one. It feels like there's a little more excitement. We already have over 250 people registered to attend the event, which is, I think it's trending well ahead of where we usually are at this time in the schedule, with still 2.5 weeks to go. And you're right. The agenda is nearly full. I do have this one morning slot still available here, and I've got one other one in the afternoon, but otherwise we're going to hear from Peachtree, Urban Catalyst. We've got a panel with Ask the OZ experts with Jerry Rice and Brett Siglin and Mr. Ashley Tyson, the OZ Sherpa himself. We're going to hear from Capital Square, from Your Space America Self-Storage, another panel on OZs and tax reform in 2025. We'll have Shay Hawkins, Jill Homan, and Catherine Lyons on that panel. That's going to be a great one. And then rounding out the afternoon, we're going to hear from Procopio Companies. We got one more slot that's open here. I'm kind of pulling some strings behind the curtain, by the way. I know we have at least one of those slots already sold. We're just kind of trying to fit in. This whole thing's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle or playing Tetris, Andy. I've got these blocks falling at me and they're different sizes and shapes, but I always squeeze them all in. Tideline Partners, Blueprint Local, Jackson Dearborn Partners, Centennial Advisors. And then we've got some new stuff we're rolling out at opportunityzones.com and OZ Insiders. I'm going to give people a peek behind the curtain of what we've got cooking for 2025. as well, kind of heading into the new year. So I always like the fall OZ pitch day. I do feel like it's always our strongest one every year. I think just the time where it is in the calendar, early to mid-November, great time for tax planning and for thinking about your investment strategy moving into the new year. Andy, anything else from you about OZ Pitch Day, or what are you looking forward to the most on the agenda? Let me ask you that.
Well, I like that it's free. So this is my plug to our audience. You can register. It's totally free to attend. Just got to go to opportunityzones.com, click the big blue button or orange button, depending on what page you're on. You'll see it. Can't miss it. Register. It's free. It's quick. It's easy. And then you won't miss it. And you don't want to miss this one, Jimmy. Anything else on pitch day? Because we got some election stuff to talk about. We did promise a special election episode.
We did promise a special election show. I've even got bunting on the thumbnail, the YouTube thumbnail for this episode. Although I wasn't sure if that was for the election or maybe for the World Series, because sometimes stadiums decorate their stadiums with bunting for the World Series and the All-Star game and opening day. Just a lot of baseball talk here.
I'm now inferring what the word bunting means.
Okay. Bunting is like the red, white, and blue kind of, drapey stuff that people might, look it up. I'll look it up while you get onto the next topic of discussion here, Andy. What do we got?
A lightweight, loosely woven fabric used chiefly for flags and festive decorations. Yeah, you know what, Jimmy? You nailed it. So thank you. That's my word of the day. Is bunting. Jimmy, we got to talk about the election. Okay.
Let's do it.
We're going to do our final predictions, both for the election itself, for the opportunity zones, potential extension before it expires, final predictions before this election, I should say. But one thing that I did want to do, Jimmy, is to kind of talk big picture. We've alluded to it. We've hinted at it. Sometimes we've made jokes about it. I think we just need to come right out and succinctly explain how this election, the presidential election specifically, is going to affect the Opportunity Zones program. And there was actually an article in Kiplinger about just the subject. They talked about 1031 exchanges as well in the article. I don't necessarily want to go into the 1031 thing. That's kind of its own thing. And it also tends to be a little bit more exaggerated. But I think with the Opportunity Zones program, there's no exaggeration here. This election really is of monumental importance to the program, because the program as written is going to expire in a few years, right, Jimmy? And if Donald Trump is elected as president, it's more likely that the program will get extended before it expires. I mean, is that the essential?
Particularly if the Republicans also control the House and the Senate. I think if there's a Republican sweep, it is very likely that opportunity zones get extended and potentially reauthorized under President Donald Trump. That is the most favorable environment for the opportunity zones program. Putting everything else aside, we're just talking about OZs right now. A Republican sweep would be the most favorable environment for OZs to get extended and potentially reauthorized. Andy, that's correct.
And if we're reading the tea leaves, or maybe even just looking into some specific statements, a President Kamala Harris is pretty unlikely, or very unlikely even, to sign an extension to this Opportunity Zones program. Would you say that that's accurate?
Well, I don't know that I would say extremely unlikely. I'm going to push back on that a little bit. I think she's
very unlikely.
Very. Is that what you said? Very. I'm going to push back and it's very unlikely too. I think she's certainly less enthusiastic on the campaign trail about opportunity zones than Donald Trump. This is, for better or worse, a Trump program, although it does have bipartisan roots. So Democrats, federally elected Democrats in the House and the Senate, and potentially Kamala Harris, Democratic candidates for federally elected positions, they are reluctant to praise opportunity zones too much because they know that it's a Trump program. Now, I think after the election, let's consider a possibility when Kamala Harris wins the White House, and let's say Democrats sweep the House and the Senate also. Maybe the polls are wrong. All indications kind of point to, it looks like at this point in time, and I'll cover the odds in a minute, it looks more like we're going to get a Donald Trump presidency, and a decent chance, at least, of a Republican sweep is being the most likely outcome. Not more than 50% though, so there is no majority outcome. But maybe the polls are wrong. Maybe the Democrats sweep. Maybe Kamala Harris is in the White House and she has the full backing of the Senate and the House. I think there's a good chance that they do something with tax legislation if they have control to be able to pass tax legislation. Now, does that tax legislation reinstate all of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? No, probably not. A lot of it was very much backed only by the Republican Party. It is Trump's signature tax policy. But here's the fact of the matter, Andy. If the TCJA expires at the end of 2025 and nothing changes, taxes are going to go up for more than 60% of American households. And that'll first be felt on the very first paychecks that they receive in January of 2026. So do you want to be an elected official responsible for taxes going up? No, probably not. So that's why I'm thinking that the Democrats will pass some sort of tax legislation at the end of 2025 if they are able to sweep into power. But, will opportunity zones be a part of it? I don't know. I wouldn't dismiss the possibility that they could be. With an election behind us, maybe opportunity zones having the bipartisan roots that they did, maybe having Senator Cory Booker, a very influential member, possibly the leader of the Senate Finance Committee, he might want opportunity zones to be a part of that package that gets put through under a potential Democratic sweep. So anyways, that was my long-winded answer there, Andy. But I don't think it's very unlikely that OZs go away if Kamala Harris gets elected. But less likely than if Donald Trump gets elected. I would agree with that.
Significantly less likely, right? Because just in general, the political winds, I think, have shifted in terms of this program just because of it being associated with the Trump tax cuts. But you're right. And on one other note, one thing about Kamala Harris, I think she's been criticized by some people for sort of changing her positions on various issues from being one of the most or the most liberal members of the Senate to then adopting some more, centrist positions. And so I do think it's a little bit of a guess, where her administration would stand in terms of tax reform. And, perhaps in regards to the Opportunity Zones program, that could be a good thing. It could be an opportunity, right?
Well, yeah. And if I can just point out this one section of this Kiplinger article, I'll just read this part here. She did at one point want to just repeal the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act entirely. She has since backed off of that. And she did support the 2019 Opportunity Zone Reporting and Reform Act. The legislation would have required more detailed reporting from QOZ funds. And there's this quote from her that says, "We need to make sure these tax incentives are actually benefiting the communities they're supposed to help, not just wealthy investors," Harris stated when introducing the bill. So I think she doesn't hate opportunity zones. She doesn't want to repeal them entirely, at least according to these quotes from some years ago. But I think she just wants to put additional guardrails around opportunity zones, stricter criteria, just reform them. And I think there's been a call from both sides of the aisle to reform OZs. We've covered that ad nauseum on these shows on our opportunityzones.com YouTube channel. Certainly Harris, opportunity zones under Harris would look a little different than under Trump potentially, but I think there's a chance even if Kamala Harris and the Democrats come into power in January, Andy.
Understood. Okay, well, I think we understand what the stakes are. We don't necessarily know what each administration would do, obviously, but it is going to be more likely that the program gets extended under President Trump. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say, yes. And by the way, we also, for those who may have missed this episode that we released a couple weeks back on October 16th, I interviewed John Scheretti and Jason Watkins. And in addition to previewing, these are two partners at Novogradac, we previewed their Novogradac OZ Summit, but we also spent a really long time talking about the election's impact on opportunity zones. I don't think we referenced that Kiplinger article specifically, but we all shared our thoughts on what might happen if Trump wins? What might happen if Harris wins? What might happen if there's split power, if one party wins the White House, but then a different party wins one of the chambers of Congress? So we get into great detail here. It's this episode's, I think, over 45 minutes long. So pretty thorough discussion. If you enjoyed our quick discussion here, tune into this episode with John Scheretti and Jason Watkins, Andy.
And Jimmy, with that, I think we got to get on the record with our final pre-election predictions, both for the presidential election and then an update on our personal predictions that the OZ program gets reformed and extended before it is due to expire. But let's start by, you've already brought up poly market here, Jimmy.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the betting markets and how they're handicapping the race right now?
Well, it's really interesting. I've been saying the last 3 months, I think I've been between 60 to 65%. And I think maybe I looked crazy a month ago, because a month ago it was 50-50, or possibly Harris even led like 51 to 49 roughly 1 month ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still saying Donald Trump 60%. And now there have been some sizable bets placed by, possibly just one or maybe a small number of whales on poly market. And I think that has skewed the futures market pretty considerably over the last few weeks here. But generally the trend for the last 3 weeks has been Trump has been on an upward trajectory and Harris has been on a downward trajectory, at least as far as these betting markets are concerned. Here's poly market. I can also pull up Predict It. They show similar numbers on poly market. Let's see, it's 66% Donald Trump right now, rounding up. On Predict It, it's 60 cents for a Donald Trump share. These shares add up to more than $1 here on this site. The methodology is a little bit different. But you can see that same general trend over the last 30 days. Trump up, Harris down considerably. And then I'll also pull up Real Clear Politics. This is not their polling average, but rather their betting odds data averages. So the RPC betting markets averages right now 62% Trump, 37% Harris. And again, just a month ago when we did this OZ NewsHour episode, it was looking 50-50 or maybe slightly in favor of Harris, maybe 51-50, something, 51-49, I should say, something to that effect. So quite a big change just over the last few weeks here. Andy, did you want me to give my predictions, my thoughts?
Well, one more thing. Could you bring up the Real Clear Politics, the actual polling average?
I can in a moment here. I'll see if I can find that. But what are your thoughts on the movement here over the last few weeks?
Yeah, why don't I'll go first with my prediction, Jimmy. I always make you go first, so I'll give you the benefit this time of me going first. So, if you look at Real Clear Politics, I believe the national polls.
I just pulled up the national poll here, Andy. So it's Trump plus 0.2, very tight.
But that's about as good as he's done, and that's the national popular vote, not
you can see. By the way, they even have right up here this day in history in 2016, Clinton was up by 4.5 points.
Mm-hmm.
We know how that turned out. Biden was up by 7.5 points. We know how that election turned out. It ended up being much closer than these 7.5 points. So the polls kind of missed. They overweighted toward the Democratic nominee in both of those years, if I'm not mistaken, Andy, right?
Right. And so here's what I would say. If the popular vote is a virtual tie,
right,
then Trump will most likely handily win the election, the Electoral College.
If past history repeats itself, where the Republican candidate seems to overperform on the Electoral College, but underperform on the national vote, right?
Right. So that's about in previous presidential elections, recent ones. If the Republican can close within 2.5 points of the popular vote, they're very likely to win the Electoral College. So based on that national popular polling average, that would say Trump. But I'm only giving this, percent chances that Trump wins 51%, Jimmy. So I still think it's more likely than not that he wins. If you flip the coin 100 times, I think he just ekes out maybe one or two more victories than Harris. But the big unknown is the lower propensity voters, Jimmy, because I think that the one huge advantage that Harris has and that the Democratic machine has is the get out the vote operation. They are much better financed than the Republicans this time around, and the highly likely voters, the more regular voters, they will definitely tend to lean Democratic, and then the more occasional voters or the less reliable voters, as far as I understand, Donald Trump is winning that cohort that easily, handily, by a pretty significant margin. And so I do think that adds a lot of uncertainty to the polling.
It always just depends who actually shows up.
Yeah, bingo. So my final prediction, 51% chance Trump wins the election. And I'm going to give identical odds to the OZ program being reformed and extended before it expires. I think it's more likely than not. But I don't think it's totally guaranteed, even with a Republican sweep. It's not totally guaranteed that it would get reformed and extended. And I don't really like its chances at all in a Harris administration, Jimmy. I think in the previous episode of this show, I gave it like a 1% chance in the Harris administration. And maybe you've convinced me that it's a little bit higher than that. But I think it's going to be a hard sell to a President Harris.
Fair enough, Andy. I have just pulled up on Polymarket their futures market for balance of power, and Republican sweep has become, just in the matter of the last 3 weeks here, by far the favorite, with nearly a 50% chance of coming to fruition, again, according to this one particular futures market. I think this, again, is the most favorable outcome for opportunity zones getting extended or possibly reauthorized. Democrats sweep might be the second, believe it or not, this is the second most favorable outcome, because at least then we're almost certainly going to get some sort of comprehensive tax legislation vehicle toward the end of the 2025 year, the type of vehicle that an opportunity zone extension provision can ride into. It's when you get into these split power type of scenarios where it becomes harder to pass comprehensive tax legislation toward the end of 2025, even if the White House might want to renew opportunity zones. If he has to work with Democratic House, it just becomes a little bit stickier, right? So there's still a pretty good possibility that we get a split power across those three different organizations come January of 2025. Going back to the presidential market here, what was it at? It's nearly 2/3. Donald Trump, we got 66%, Donald Trump 34%, Kamala Harris. I was a little bit more optimistic for President Trump than this market over the past couple of months, and now I'm slightly more pessimistic. I'm going to stick at my 60% for Donald Trump still. I think there's a 60% chance Trump wins the presidency. And I think it's probably 50-50 whether or not that results in a Republican sweep or not. I would say on the balance, 60% chance that that opportunity zones get renewed or extended at some point prior to the end of 2025. So that's my final prediction. Andy, what else do we have?
I think that puts a neat little bow, ties up and puts a neat little bow on our election coverage. I do like talking about the election with you, Jimmy, and this is
I'm gonna miss it. I don't know what we're gonna talk about next time.
I think maybe we've had some viewers who've mentioned that it's one of their favorite segments of the show. So I'm gonna miss it in one sense. I'm not gonna miss the actual election season, the commercials, and so on. So I guess I'm looking forward to
a lot of commercials.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our next episode of this show without the election coverage. And Jimmy, we are almost out of time. But what is your pick of the month? What are you watching, reading, or listening to in the world of opportunity zones or real estate investing that you would recommend to our audience?
Well, tonight I'm watching Game 3 of the World Series, Andy. I think it's 8 8:08 p.m. Eastern time, first pitch on Fox. So make sure you tune into that. The most consequential World Series of our lifetime, Andy. Yankees, Dodgers. Shohei Ohtani is gonna be in the ball game for the Dodgers. I know you were worried about his shoulder injury the other day, but what am I reading about in the world of real estate? Andy, I'm going to give you some props here. This is your private investment real estate firm, Mastiff Equity Partners. You completed your first acquisition in the heart of downtown Saugatuck, Michigan, just a couple weeks back. So congratulations to you. You acquired a 5,900 square foot retail space with, I think it's 3 tenants, right? 3 different restaurants at 302 Culver Street. Andy, what the heck are you thinking buying retail in this economy?
But, contrary to popular belief, retail is not dead. What is it? Rumors of retail's death have been greatly
exaggerated. Yeah.
The retail vacancy rate is something like 5% or 5.5% nationwide, Jimmy. And so it turns out when people don't build any more of a particular asset class, and there still is demand for that asset class, that there are favorable market dynamics. So I'm a big believer in retail, as long as it's the right kind of retail real estate. I'm a retail bull. And I think it's a sector where it's a little bit easier to get some deals to pencil right now as compared to some of the other sectors in commercial real estate. I had a tremendous amount of fun. It was exciting doing my first deal for a multi-tenant, commercial type property. And I'm already looking at another deal. So nothing to announce yet. But I think we have more in store for the firm in 2025.
Well, congrats again. Looking forward to seeing what happens with your next acquisition.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you. And, right back at you, I want to compliment you with my pick, which is your article about Major League Baseball stadiums that are located adjacent to or within opportunity zones. And from what I understand, you were sitting on this article and it was like almost done for such a long time. Well, it's perfect timing to publish this right before the Dodgers are in the World Series, which is quite exciting. I have to say, this is a really good World Series. And Jimmy, another thing I enjoyed about your article, this is kind of an aside. I've decided, for me, it's a bucket list to visit each and every Major League Baseball stadium in my lifetime. I've already
I love that.
Yeah, I know that it's been done by many other people, so maybe it's sort of cliche, but
it's never been done by you.
Exactly. Great photo included in the article of me wearing my Detroit Tigers hat. We had a great run this year. And Jimmy, it was kind of surprising to me that so many stadiums were located in or adjacent to an opportunity zone. I would think that normally baseball stadiums are in pretty, kind of prime real estate, but that's not always the case, right?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is it kind of speaks to how these opportunity zones were designated in the first place. And these stadium districts or arena districts aren't always built in the greatest parts of town, but they're oftentimes built in parts of town that are kind of up and coming on the upswing. And so I think they're actually very favorable to be stadium districts for the city, but then that also makes them prime opportunity zone type locations. So yeah, if you consider that 12% of the landmass of the U.S. lies within an OZ, but what is it, 17? I guess it was 14 out of the 31, more than half of all current and future Major League Baseball stadiums sit in an OZ. Kind of interesting. By the way, we wrote a similar article about NFL stadiums and opportunity zones a few years back, and pretty much the same finding. 18 out of the 30 NFL stadiums are either in an opportunity zone or like right next to an opportunity zone. So you can check these out at opportunityzones.com. I had a lot of fun writing these articles. I have to put a picture of you and me at a ballpark on an update to this article, Andy, in the near future here, hopefully.
Good idea. So everybody can check out that article at opportunityzones.com. Don't forget to register for OZ Pitch Day coming up. It's free. And Jimmy, at 59 minutes past the hour, I think that's it for today's show. Yeah, we'll be back in a month or two with our next edition of OZ NewsHour. Thank you for watching and listening. And Jimmy, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Andy. Go Dodgers.
Go Dodgers.